Guys, welcome back to the show, and I'm joined in studio with Greg Bloom, the CEO of BYB Extreme and BYB. Mr. Bloom, how are you feeling and how's everything?
Ike, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Look, this year has been a massive year for BYB as a brand, not just in the sense of events and promoting or fights, but you've also acquired a brand from the UK, BKB. So it's a big step and a big chapter in the BYB brand's history. But can you also give us a bit of a just what we can expect for 2025 as well?
I think 2025 is going to be probably the biggest year yet with the acquisition of BKB. As you mentioned, it's given us a lot of global reach. And so we're able to put on great matchups with fighters from both sides of the pond. And so it's really exciting. We're shooting to do 16 shows next year, eight in the UK, eight in the US. So we're going to continue to grow the roster on both sides, continue to put on the best matchups we can for the fans.
It's first for me speaking with you and someone like yourself, you're very unique in the sense that you're someone who's working from the very inside of a big promotion for a very major combat sport. Can you just give me a bit of a background about just, yourself and how you got into combat sports and beyond that bare knuckle boxing?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of fell into it, to be honest. I um, went back to law school when I was 33 years old. And while I was in law school, I used to train at a boxing gym. And I met a fighter who was looking for assistance with management. I ended up managing him. And then fast forward 3 years. And when I finished law school, I had a sports agency representing about 30 to 40 boxers and MMA fighters. From there, I sort of transitioned everything over time into my law firm. I am a sports and entertainment attorney by trade. And so combat sports became my core business, boxing, MMA, and then I was introduced to Mike Vasquez, the owner of BYB, and I became the attorney at first for the company. And then I was the attorney for a couple of years and got the opportunity to sit and watch Mike grow the company from the background. And then he had brought it to such a level that it just needed help, it needed assistance. So he asked me to come in as the CEO and help continue to work with him to grow the brand. And here we are today.
That that's quite a story and quite a journey. Um, so Claire, you're coming not just from the background of well, not so much combat sports, but also from let's say a legal academic perspective as well. I do find that from a lot of things that's happening with other promotions, or like in the UFC, fighters are always making noise about complaining about better pay, earning what they're worth for each fight. Does it help you make sure that in the case of BYB that the fighters that your fighters are well looked after and actually well paid for every promotion they or event they take part in, they compete in?
Yeah, I mean, we do our best to compensate the fighters at a high level for what they do. It is a two-way street. If a fighter, if people want to tune in to see a fighter perform, it's going to be easier to promote that event. Everything's going to make more money, and it's easier then to pay everyone more. But currently we're a growing concern. We're an up and coming emerging league, so uh, we try to pay the fighters as best we can, and I believe we pay very competitively towards the market. But as we grow, the purses will grow, and everyone, a rising tide lifts all ships.
A bit about yourself. You have also promoted other events worldwide. So this is something that even though it's only about 2 years ago you became the CEO, that you've been involved in, let's say, in this industry for a very long time. I think you have promoted other events elsewhere globally as well.
Yes, I've probably promoted over 100 shows in my time. For the Prior to working with BYB, I worked with a company called Combate Global, a very well recognized MMA organization. And so when I was working with them, I also wore a promoter's hat um, for a lot of their events. So I was able to get the experience from that side, mix it with my legal knowledge and bring everything over to BYB. And use that as a roadmap to help grow the company.
It's a growing brand, but also at the same time, would you ever see in the future that BYB would ever do cross promoting with any of the other promoters within the combat sports realm? Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it always depends on the deal. And if it was a deal that made business sense for everyone and for everyone's brand, then we'd be open to it. The only difficulty is that we fight in the Trigon, which is unique to itself. So we would always want the fighters who want to prove themselves in any capacity to come over and fight in the Trigon because it really is the proving ground of combat sports.
So I think you kind of answered my next question for you. Is I was going to ask you the trigon itself, and I may be bashed for this in the comments or whoever listens to this afterwards for being maybe a bit of a silly question, but is that the reason why the trigon is the way it is? That's the reason why it's that particular shape.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Trigon by its nature pushes the action. In a square ring, you can slide out of a corner. In a circular cage, you can circle out. But in a triangle, because the corners are so tight, the only way out is to move forward. So by its nature, it pushes the action, thus making
Yes.
it a more exciting contest and usually leaving it out of the hands of the judges.
Bare-knuckle boxing, I have to say that what really got me into following the sport is the knockouts and the punches. And whenever I see the athletes after a fight, whether they have lost or even won a fight, how they look afterwards, um, it's always a true testament to the statement that this is not for the faint-hearted. You have to be in it 110% of the time. You can't be in it 50-50. You must be your heart must be in this. So I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the sports itself, do you still get maybe some backlash or some backpedaling that no, this isn't something we'd like to promote. This is not something I'd like to get involved in. Do you still get a lot of naysaying?
It's becoming less and less as the sport evolves and as people get to really see that it's a true combat sport. You know, that type of response traditionally comes from people who are uneducated as to the product, or they haven't seen it, or they haven't heard of it, or once they hear of it, they're just basing an opinion off what they believe it to be, not what it really is. So I think as time goes on, it's becoming well recognized and accepted in combat sports, and I think that that trend's going to continue.
Awesome. I like that because it's a very entertaining sport. When any of the fights, I can be sure that I'm going to be in for a very entertaining night of entertainment,
Yeah.
basically. Going forward, will we be seeing BKB no, not BKB, BYB, excuse me, expanding to other markets? I mean, coming out of your core audience in North America and the USA, going to maybe to Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Pacific.
Yeah, I mean, that's in our plans over time. We're probably going to look to take over just one continent at a time. It was the US. Now we've come over to Europe. We may try to get into Asia and South America. So, whatever makes sense as far as from a business capacity, we will start to expand slowly. But yes, to answer your question, it is in the plans, and we plan on being the biggest and the best globally recognized bare knuckle company in the world.
Social media and combat sports. What do you think of what we've seen so far, at least with regards to, boxing? And do you think it's something we could potentially see in bare knuckle boxing? These influences, do you think that it's something that we could see in BKB? Because I think so far Jake Paul and Logan Paul, people don't exactly agree with them, especially when they call themselves professional boxers. The sorts
Right.
of people who they've been in the ring with, whether they've lost or won the fight, doesn't really put them on the same sort of level as a proper professional boxer or fighter.
Well, my opinion's a little varied on that. And, when it comes to someone like Jake Paul, what I'll tell you is this. In my opinion, he's put in as much work as any fighter who started from the amateurs through their first, what do you say, have 13 or 14 fights. If you look at most, even the best of the best, Shakur Stevenson, Gervonta Davis, if you look at their first 12 fights, I'm positive the combined records were very much upside down of those opponents. So Jake Paul might not have been taking on proper boxers, but he was taking on seasoned professional fighters, who I would suggest talent equals the first 5 or 6 fights that a boxing superstar would have. So, you know, that's my
Uh,
opinion on it. So I think he's put in the work. I think he brings a lot to the table. I mean, he's bringing eyeballs back to boxing, which is something that haven't been there for a number of years. So you got to give him something.
yeah, I have to agree because whenever he's fighting, whether you love the guy or hate the guy, eyeballs will be on that ring on that event. So he's in one thing, he's bringing that draw back to that sport.
Yeah, yeah, and that and that's what makes a superstar. Half the people pay to see him win, and half the people pay to see him get knocked out.
You know, for a CEO like yourself, and I kind of asked you at the beginning about this, just how you've been. I said it's going to be a bit of a silly question because obviously being CEO, you can be mega busy without even a second for yourself. A typical day for a CEO of a big combat sports and promotion like such as BYB, what does your typical day or even week normally look like?
I mean, it varies. Like for example, this week we have a fight coming up on Friday. So a lot of my week, fortunately, it's in my hometown, so I don't have to travel, but I'll just have to drive to the arena and to the hotel and the weigh-ins and so forth. But so this week is going to be dictated by meetings and fight week, making sure that the event is going to run smoothly. But when it's not fight week, it's still a lot of travel, a lot of meetings, a lot of contracts, a lot of negotiations, looking to talk with sponsors and media outlets and sports gambling properties and ways to help do mutually beneficial agreements amongst the companies. So that really monopolizes a lot of the time.
Some There is one aspect of combat sports that I don't particularly like. I know that the promotions and the promoters don't have a hand or say in that, and that is the judging of fights. I mean, you just look at some fights I've seen before in the past. I can think of many off the top of my head, and I remember how shocked I was, how shocked many other fight fans in the audience were at the result that this fighter won. Well, clearly it should have been the other fight that won. I mean, what is that like for someone like yourself who's working from the inside? When a judge kind of makes a decision and then collectively that all the decisions will produce this result. When that happens, what is that like? I mean, what's the reaction within the corporation, within the company?
I mean, this is a subjective question, you know? So it's hard, it's hard to tell them they were 100% wrong, even though that's what the majority thinks. So it doesn't really um, take away from us as a company, I would say. But you want to make sure that the judges are well skilled and well prepared and they're doing the proper job. But fortunately, at BYB and fighting in the Trigon, it's about an 85 to 90% knockout rate. So we haven't really been tasked with too many of those unfortunate judges' decisions because most of our fights don't go to decision.
Yeah, yeah. No, completely understand where you're coming from with that. Um, 2025, some big fights are on the roster, on the cards there. The one that's happening at the start of the year is James Connolly versus LT Nelson. The Truth versus Smash, and from what I can see, these two are supposed to be a rematch or so they're supposed to have of their former fight. Another one's Alex Wilson versus Jack Marshman. Can you talk a bit about those upcoming events?
Sure, sure. Yeah, the first one is January 11th in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's headlined by LT Nelson, our two-division champ, going against James Kennelly in a rematch from their fight from this January. That was a draw. So it's a rematch that has been in the making for a year, and both guys since that fight have gone on to winning streaks of their own, fighting the best of the best. So now their paths are finally crossing again, and I think it's going to be one of the better fights and a great way to start off the new year. And then our event after that is February 1st in Cardiff, Wales, and we have Jack Marshman fighting Alex Wilson. Both undefeated. Jack Marshman, I mean, UFC veteran, has a really good chin. He got off the floor in his first fight with BYB to come back and win by knockout, and Alex Wilson is undefeated. So those two guys are going to go head to head, and the headline for that event was also announced: the Welsh wrecking machine Barry Jones fighting Grigoris Cisneros for the light heavyweight title. So I implore everyone within reach of my voice to go get tickets for either one of those events because they're going to be two of the most exciting bare knuckle fighting events to start off the year that you have seen.
Is there any advice you can give someone, a young fighter who is probably they're deciding to come into bare knuckle boxing and to compete in it as and gradually move into the professional stage of the fight and compete professionally, excuse me. Any advice for them? Because I said earlier before, it's it is a brutal sport. But I mean, what advice can you give to anyone who's thinking of coming into the sport?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I'd want them to educate themselves about the sport because I mentioned this on a conversation the other day that the truth and the medical science behind bare knuckle shows that it's 5 times less injurious than MMA and 4 times less than professional boxing. So it's a very difficult sport, and you have to train specifically for it because you don't have gloves. So you have to make sure as to throw limited punches. The glove was invented to protect the hand, not the face. So you become a more technically skilled fighter, I believe, in bare knuckle fighting because you don't throw as many punches. So I would tell any young fighter coming up, train specifically for it and try it because I think it's an avenue for a lot of young fighters who may not have, whether they don't have opportunity elsewhere or they're better served for this style of fighting. I think it opens up a whole new road for them to take professionally as a combat sports athlete.
Yeah. Right. You've given a very like what detailed but educated answer there because it's something they should think about going long term. I
Yeah.
think for the long haul. Look, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything else you'd like to say about the upcoming year 2025? Any other big events, stats cards that we should be looking forward to seeing?
Well, like I mentioned, we're going to be doing 16 events, 8 in the UK, 8 in the US, and it's going to be the best year ever for BYB. So I'd ask that anyone who's interested in bare knuckle fighting come and follow BYB Extreme. At BYB Extreme is all our social media handles, and come see what real bare knuckle fighting is all about because we really are the biggest and baddest promotional company in bare knuckle fighting.
Greg, it's been really awesome speaking to you, and I'm very grateful for you coming on to the show and taking time out of your very hectic schedule to speak to me. Thank you so much. And please, any shout outs or tags, you get your team to send it to me. I'll make sure I tag it in the description when I upload this to my stories and to my feed. Guys,
Perfect.
Guys, thank you for listening, for watching. If you watched on YouTube, excuse me, if you watched on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe and to hit the like button. You can also catch the episode on the audio platforms of Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes. Greg, thank you once again so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ike. My pleasure.